Hello, everyone. Dr. Eames here. This time I'd like to talk to you about one of the elements of free market capitalism, the notion of supply and demand. It's through understanding supply and demand for any given product that we are able to figure out what the correct market price ought to be. In other words, we don't want to make too much of something, and we don't want to sell it at the wrong price, and we don't want to make too little of something and where we can't meet what consumers are wanting and needing out there. So let's just define the concepts first. Supply is really what is the availability of the product? Do we have enough to meet what people want and need out there? And is it available? Or are you able to manufacture it quickly and get it to them? So that's what supply is about. It's about the quantity of products that you can provide and make available at a different price, at a different time, just depending on what you choose to do. But it is about the availability and your ability to produce that product in response to what you see out there in the consumer market. Now, this is not the same as demand, because demand is how much do people want the product? What do they want? How much of it? Do they want to buy it? And in what numbers? And this is the same idea that we usually match up both supply and demand against the idea of what is the price and how much do we supply at a certain price and how much is demand at a certain price. So demand is about how much you can sell, but supply is different. Supply is about how much you can make available to sell. And so the idea is that you track these notions on graphs. And so you produce a supply curve for any given product, and you produce a demand curve. And it just naturally works out that these curves are exactly opposite to each other. One goes down and one goes up. And when you combine them in the same graph, they will cross. And that point at which they cross is a significant one. It's the equilibrium point. And the equilibrium point allows us to find out very quickly, this is the correct price to sell this item at, so we don't make too much or we don't make too little, and that we have enough supply available to meet what we have discovered is the right market price. So it is about supply and demand. Here's our supply curve. Notice that the price is on the left, and across the bottom is the quantity. And so we're looking at the supply curve for t-shirts here. What's interesting about a product like this is, generally when we look at a supply curve, for most products, this is a pretty typical curve. And so it's a common one that we see out there a lot. So let's just interpret what we're looking at here. If you look at the price of $5 on the left, and we see where the curve is and where it begins, well, it says there that at $5, we make 5 available. Let's take a look up at the top, at the other end of that curve. At $50 per shirt, per t-shirt, we make 50 available. Now, that's the thing with the supply curve. When you look at it, that doesn't seem intuitively correct, does it? Think about it for a moment. If something is selling for $5, we wouldn't expect to sell just 5 maybe, but maybe 50. And if we had the price that every t-shirt was $50, well, maybe we'd only sell 5. So the supply curve is not what we would intuitively think it might turn out to be. It's not about really the price. And so the supply curve, when we see one like this, it tells us that the price is really not the biggest factor here. That regardless of price, we can provide the number of shirts that are needed. And so we can meet demand, and it has not very much at all to do with what price we're going to sell it at. So supply is strictly, can you produce enough? Do you have enough available? And so forth. But it's not really linked to price. Let's take a look at the other curve, the demand curve. Now this demand curve, you'll notice, is the exact opposite. It goes down. So let's just analyze what's going on. This curve is indeed intuitive. It says if you look over on the price side at $50, we'll produce, maybe 1 or 2 shirts. If you look straight down, and the first scale on the bottom is 0 to 5 quantity, It looks like at $50, we're going to produce a couple of t-shirts. That seems to make some intuitive sense. Uh, then look at the other end of that curve where it goes. It's slightly above zero, right? So the price is down around $1. Well, if that's the case, where that blue line is down around $1, we could easily anticipate that 50 shirts is how much the demand is at that price. So price does matter for demand, but not for supply. But what we're really trying to find out from the data of these two curves is what is the best price? What's the optimum market price to sell at? And so combining this information gives us this, the equilibrium point. It's where the demand curve and the supply curve cross. And so let's just analyze what we've got here. These are the same original two curves we started with. Notice our demand curve started up at around 50 and went on down and so forth. Or excuse me, here's our supply curve, and then here is the demand curve. This is our equilibrium point right here. So really, this is telling us at $15, we can make available 25 shirts. The supply curve has no problem providing 25 shirts, right? We could provide 50 shirts just on this scale alone. Now, these are in 5 increments, but you could make bigger numbers and have a longer scale if you wanted. But likely the curve would continue pretty much like we're seeing it here, just spread out more. So this is the price where we think we can make the right amount, and we can predict into the future by looking at those sorts of things. So that's really the significance of using the supply and demand curves in order to find really what is the optimum price to sell this sort of material. Okay, folks, that's all I want to talk about this time. I'll talk to you again soon.